Welcome everybody, this is the special interest group for PnP Site Score, PnP PowerShell, PnP Site Provisioning, and the SharePoint Dev in general. We do have two, let's say, weekly or bi-weekly community calls. So bi-weekly we'll talk about SharePoint development in general, more on the site provisioning, automation, and all of that stuff. And then bi-weekly it's more specific on the SharePoint framework. Today we'll kind of talk about the actual SharePoint framework in the context of the provisioning. So how do we actually make SharePoint framework solution to get deployed across all of the sites automatically, already with the existing capabilities what we have within the SharePoint Online, and then slightly touching also what's coming up in the future, because that's kind of the classic scenario of, hey, I have tens of thousands of sites, or I have 1,000 sites or site collections, and I need to make sure that my customization is available in all of those sites. So how do I make that happen? And actually you can do that already today. And today I'm going to do a demo, and you should never ever start by a presentation by apologizing, but let's see how well my demo, well, I know that the demo works, but I haven't had a massive amount of time on polishing up stuff, because this demo is targeted mainly for Ignite, but we wanted to actually show you guys also that it's doable already today with the pre-release stuff, which is available in the dev branch, partly in PnP, partly in other stuff and all of that. So let's talk about that one in a second. Now, the second thing what I wanted to actually quickly talk about is something which came up actually in the internal SharePoint, internal Microsoft discussions. And then we realized that, hey, interesting. We have not actually explained anywhere properly in our documentation that you can already today, within the SharePoint Online, related on the modern groups in the SharePoint UIs, do native out-of-the-box classification of the sites. So I'm going to walk through that demo today as well. I think we'll spend the majority of the time on the automation of pushing SharePoint framework stuff on the sites in that live demo, and I'll have a look on the IM window, and we can have an interactive demo based on your input. But the key point is to demonstrate how would I able to push SharePoint framework extensions and web parts to the sites across all of my tenants. And the second part of the demo, and second demo today, will be around controlling the out-of-the-box site classification in the native provisioning flow. I'll explain what it actually means before we go to the demo as well. But apparently we haven't actually properly documented that anywhere, like mentioned, so it's good to get it covered in these calls as well. Good. Yes, indeed. Paul has a good comment. So the Teams app has an indicator about group classification. It'd be nice to learn how to control that. Yes. I'm going to be, like I usually am, super transparent and open on this one again. So apparently we shipped that capability actually already months ago. But nobody actually understood that it would make sense to explain for the community and customers and partners how to actually do that. So let's fix that now that we know that there's a gap on the messaging around that one. Kind of an awkward thing, but hey, these things do happen. We're shipping so many things so fast. Yes, but it's a positive surprise, Patrick. Come on. Now, moving on things. So let's actually a few announcements. It's kind of a classic reminders on the things. If you will be in Ignite later this month, there will be 4 specific sessions on the SharePoint development. One kind of a generic session, one from Luca and Paolo around SharePoint framework web parts and extensions, one from me and Erwin around the PnP and how do we do the end-to-end provisioning models and the latest on PnP JavaScript core and our reusable controls and all of the interesting stuff. And then one session from Jax and Waldek around the best practices on SPFX development. We also have a pre-day. I'm not sure if there's any free spots on that free day, but in the free day, there's an Office Dev free day where we will have MVPs and me and engineering people from Graph, Teams and SharePoint talking about the SharePoint talking about the development aspects. That's mainly, I would say, 200, 300 level. So it's high level. If you're not super familiar on the SharePoint framework, that might be a good case and good time to jump in and learn about those stuff. If you are in Ignite, if you're not in Ignite, you'll get the material using alternative options as well. Good. What else? Quickly just pinpointing on let's say the usage. If this is kind of a classic slide, this is us promoting, hey, people are using SharePoint, and the SharePoint development is growing. But it is a good thing, because most likely you in this call and people who are watching the video, you are actually working within the SharePoint, and you might be wondering that, are you the only person working within the SharePoint? Are you the only person working with SharePoint framework? Are you the only person working with PnP? And the answer is no, you're not. So the usage and the direction of the SharePoint development is pretty visible within our telemetry. So in the PnP, we can clearly see that the remote provisioning models and the automation and business automation models are growing significantly. So the PnP components, so the PnP core, PnP PowerShell, was used in more than 8,400 tenants within last month, and that's quite a lot. I think we had more than 2,000, 3,000 tenants with site provisioning site provisioning engine usage. So definitely not alone if you start using the engine. In general, the second kind of a chart on the slide is showing also the direction where we're heading from a customization perspective. So more and more people are actually using JavaScript to customize SharePoint and SharePoint Online. And which is understandable, because SharePoint framework is giving you those options in a more flexible way, and also from a more guaranteed way. So the PnP JS core helps on adaptation of the JavaScript customization, and that usage is growing quite significantly as well. And the last chart on the slide is more showing on the community interest. That's just comparing the visitors within individual repositories inside of the SharePoint organization. And it's actually interesting to see that more and more people are kind of finding the GitHub, finding our open source initiatives, finding the free code and samples and everything else, what's available, because we now tripled our audience since last year, August. So from August 2016, August 2017, there's pretty much at 3 times more people and unique visitors within a SharePoint organization in GitHub, which is a great thing, because we absolutely want the people to find us and want people to find the samples and people to use the samples, and obviously GitHub is a great channel to also ask questions if you find issues using the SPDev docs issue list and reporting issues on the SharePoint framework and so on. Cool. That's just a quick kind of on a quick topics on the random announcements on the SharePoint things. So I didn't have anything, let's say, mind-blowing at this point, because we're heading closer and closer on Ignite, and the reality is that in Ignite we'll do more mind-blowing announcements. So obviously the big changes will be done and announced in Ignite, or at least majority of them. And that's why we can't actually leak too much information at this point. Now, what I wanted to really spend the majority of today is on the site provisioning and SharePoint framework combination, because this is a big thing. And this is not just about the SharePoint framework. It's also around, hey, when is the modern experiences mature enough so that we can A, provision a modern site, B, modify the modern site based on our requirements, and C, put our widgets to the modern sites based on the business requirements. And I'm going to show that today, and we're pretty close on saying, yep, it's time. So basically you can already today achieve all of these things. So if you're looking into or saying or considering the fact that, hey, should I move to the modern experiences or can I do X and Y and Z in the modern experiences? Probably you really want to carefully have a look on that, because most likely you can do that already. The techniques or approaches might be slightly different again than in classic customizations in SharePoint Online using the JavaScript injection or whatever, but you can take advantage, and you will get advantage on the out of the box modern advantages and capabilities on the modern experiences. That sounded like a marketing statement, but anyway, you probably understood what I mean with that. So let's talk about this one. So how do we? One of the key requirements, obviously, to be able to use the SharePoint Online Modern Experiences is to be able to automate our customization deployments to those sites. In the classic scenarios, in the classic experience, we were using user custom action, JS link, we were injecting our scripts to the sites and associating them to the script editor web part. And script editor web parts and these things are not available in the modern experiences, and there is actually a reason for that. And the key reason for that one is that a lot of the customers are saying that they do not want to have ad hoc script injection security risks within their SharePoint Online sites. So that capability is not there by default. So these modern experiences have a no script tags enabled, and the only way you can actually add these widgets to their sites and JavaScript to the sites is by using the SharePoint framework. And that means that the tenant administrator has to approve that customization to be present within the site. Client-side web parts are in GA since February. Extensions are now in release candidate status, and we'll head down and closer. We're getting closer and closer to the GA, so that's going to happen relatively soon. I cannot give you the date, but you can guess when that's going to happen, but I'm not going to confirm that. But that's going to happen pretty soon. Really the key point, what I'm going to show today in the live demo as well, is that how do I then take one of these widgets, a web part or an extension or both, package them up in a way that I can actually deploy that to be available within multiple sites as easy as possible without forcing go to the site and installing that web part or customization to be installed on a site. And there is kind of two main things, or the few steps which we need to consider when this is happening. So first of all, when we create the customization, the SharePoint framework customization, we need to first of all make a decision whether we host that JavaScript, because the JavaScript in the SharePoint framework solution is not getting deployed in SharePoint. Well, technically it can be deployed on SharePoint as well, but it has to be hosted in CDN. Then you actually deploy your package to the app catalog. And this is something which we technically can automate as well. But to be able to automate that identity has to have a tenant administrative permissions. And this is really the one step most likely which will not be automated within this process, because the tenant administrator would like to have a sign off that, okay, what are those widgets which we will approve within our tenant? And those are the things which we add into app catalog. Now, just looking at the window, yeah, I know you guys won't tell. It's only a small group of people in here. Let me leak something more. Now, the solution is actually putting in the app catalog. When the solution is put in the app catalog, the solution can have two different statuses. It can be either tenant scope, or it might not be a tenant scope. If it's a tenant scope solution, it is enough for the administrator to approve that once in an app catalog, and the solution is available across all of the sites. If it's not a tenant scope solution, the SharePoint framework solution has to be explicitly installed on each site where you're planning to use that. And that's one of the key points and one of the key, let's say, improvements which were released back in, was it July, early August, as part of the tenant scoped capabilities. But now, the solution content actually defines what it means that the solution is available within the site level. If the SharePoint framework solution contains a web part and it's a tenant scope solution, the web part is immediately available within the site level, and that's super cool. So you don't actually need to install anything on a site level. Your web part is available across the site, all of the site collections and all of the pages. If your solution contains an extension, so application customizer or a field customizer or a list view command set, you still need to associate that extension to the right object. So you need to still go to the site level and say, hey, within this site collection level or within the site level or within the list level, let's associate this application customizer in. And that step is the thing which probably is still slightly confusing for people. What do we need to do and how to make that happen? But luckily, we can actually use PnP provisioning for that. So we can easily create SharePoint remote provisioning template using the latest schema, which was released, which, well, I think technically it will be released tomorrow or Monday, the latest version. And you can easily create a template which you can easily automate to be applied across all of your, let's say, 10,000 site collections in a loop in a PowerShell or within the code, where you are then enabling these capabilities to be available. And that's nothing more than a classic PnP site provisioning template, which you can just configure in a certain way that you get those client-side component IDs on a place. So let me walk through this one. And I can answer questions as we move along. And I do apologize, like mentioned, I'm sure that the demo works, but I didn't have a time really polish the demo. It's been a crazy day, finding some bugs here and there and polishing stuff up. But let's actually have a look on the scenario what we're going to do here. So what we wanted to do is to make sure that automate our SharePoint framework solutions, or customization, not the solution, customization to be available across all of the sites what we have. So what we need to do is certain things. So depending on how familiar you are with SharePoint framework solution, I'm going to quickly explain this in a solution level as well. So in the SharePoint framework solution, we have a package solution JSON, which defines what is that solution. So what does the solution actually do? And in here right now, for the tenant scope configuration, we have to set this skip feature deployment equals true. And this can be set for any SharePoint framework solution. One SharePoint solution can contain multiple web parts, extensions, whatever, it doesn't matter. It's a one solution. And if I set that to be true, everything inside of that solution is then available to be associated to the sites without the solution getting deployed to the site level. Hopefully that makes sense. So what I've done here is that I have actually quite a few solutions. So let me go to my app catalog. I've installed now 4 solutions, and from these we're going to use, I think, 3 automatically within the demo. So I have my ugly field extension customizer, I have a React to do basic web part, and I have a app extension, a really simplistic extension. We'll polish all of this up for the Ignite, but you can actually understand the flow already today. And so I have this SharePoint framework solution installed, but none of this is getting installed on the site level. They are getting deployed on the tenant scope by adding them on the app catalog. And because of the setting was set, skip feature deployment, we can actually push that solution to be, in quotes, available in site level after it's being added on the app catalog. Now, like mentioned in the intro, this means that if I go to a site, so let's go to this site, which doesn't have that much, and I'm going to add a page. If any of those SharePoint framework solutions contains a web part, that web part is automatically available within the site. So if I create, let me not confuse you on this one. And this is the section which I didn't actually do any practice, or how would I actually explain this to you in an understandable format. So if I create now quickly a new site, a modern theme site, let's call this test SIG 05, and public settings is fine. So let's click OK. That's going to take a few seconds, and immediately when the button is getting active, we know that the site has been created. There we go. Now we can go to the site. So now we have this site. Site is now created without anything getting deployed on the site, explicitly using the add an app functionality. If I now go to the welcome page, if I put this page on the edit mode, and if I scroll down, for example, in here, I can already immediately see my custom to-do web part, which I can configure. And that's because of the tenant scope setting. Now, most likely, in many scenarios, you would be, well, in certain scenarios, you would be, okay, that's cool. That's actually already enough on what I need to do. So I need to get my web parts available on all of the sites, and this is okay. But then we have the SharePoint framework extensions. So in the SharePoint framework extensions, how do I get those to be available within these sites, which are getting provisioned potentially using APIs, PowerShell, or whatever processes? And let's actually have a look on that. And also, how would I get this web part automatically available within the welcome page of the site. So how do I make sure that whenever the end user comes to the site, my custom web parts and configuration and everything else is available within this modern site automatically for them, so they don't have to manually even modify the site. So let's get rid of that web part. Save the changes. So we're back on the original stage with this web part, with the sites. So what I've done here, let me go to my code and let's actually close that one and let's actually slightly zoom. So this is, how would I put it? This is still early because we haven't actually pushed out the PnP September release, and that will actually have a native support on what I'm doing. Right now I'm actually running where's my solution explorer? I'm running the dev version of the PnP core component, which will be released as a NuGet on Monday, probably Friday or Monday. But I'm running that locally within my box, so I can actually demonstrate you what's happening here. This one is a console application, but you can absolutely do the same using a PowerShell whenever we get this one working, whenever we get the September release out. And what I'm doing here is that I could actually potentially extract. Let's actually do that as well. So let me show you an extraction quickly. So if I'm going to go to that definition, and I'm just going to double check what is the name of the file. So I'm outputting from existing site. Good. So let's go to my, not on this site, let's go to a site which has been already modified. So we can see that this site has been already modified. There's modifications on the site. We can probably see that there's modifications in the front page. There's multiple sections and all of this stuff. Let's actually slightly modify this more. Add a text here which is saying SIG demo live extraction. And maybe add a, well, it doesn't really, we can add the web part here as well. It doesn't really matter for this quick demo. So now I have a custom welcome page, and you can see that I have custom associations on this live site. So I'm going to take that URL, move back on my code, and like I said, we're using, in this case, we're using just native code, but you can do this in a PowerShell whenever we get the September release out, which should be on Monday. Did I actually copy that successfully? Yes, I did. Good. There's my site. There's my get provisioning template. I'm going to go here and put a breakpoint so we can actually quickly have a look on what we're doing from a code perspective. We're not going to deep dive on the code. The key point here is to show you the capabilities rather than deep diving on what I'm actually doing. But we're using the classic PnP provisioning engine and the provisioning template creation information. We're just adding, we're interested on page content fields and lists. So we're not outputting everything from the site, just the subset of objects in the site. And then we're running this get provisioning template extension from the web object. So as long as you have a reference on the PnP CSM core object, you will have this method available, and then you're able to extract the template from a live site. So I'm going to put a breakpoint over there, and let's actually execute that one. At this point, my console application is running on a different window, but I can actually see how it runs through the individual objects. Now it's fields, list instances, and all of the additional settings as well. After the list instance, running through the list instances does take a while because lists are pretty complex in SharePoint. But then it goes to the actual pages, and then it analyzes the base structure, the sections, columns, custom web parts, settings, and all of that stuff, and it actually extracts that to be out of the site as well. So that section didn't take that long. Now, in this demo, yes, I'm going to save this as an XML. Like you know, probably typically, like with anything in the PnP provisioning, you do not have to serialize anything, and the serialization is absolutely optional thing. So now if I go to Clientside Pages, let's go in here in Clientside. I'm going to zoom in a second. Clientside Pages, we can see that we have, don't do that to me. Let me actually do a quick watch. Probably easier to show it from there. Hello. And now my Visual Studio froze. Oh no, it actually went in a different screen. There we go. So the template object is an object. And the template object contains everything within the site, what we extracted. For example, the client-side pages, we have a one page which is called the Home ASPX. In that page, we have one section. In that section, we have 6 controls. In those controls, we have a different set of information in those controls. For example, in this particular case, it is a text control, and that's the information which is in the text control. So basically, we extract everything out of the site, also including everything from a page structure perspective, the column, sections, controls, and the web parts inside of the thing. And then if you want, again, if you want to reapply that, or for future saving this from one tenant and apply that to another tenant, that could be one option or whatever, you can absolutely serialize that in an XML format.
Yes, I want to make one quick note on this.
Yes.
So this only applies for the home page. So the model is similar to classic pages, where we also only extract the home page of a classic site. We've applied the same logic here. We only extract the home page of a modern group site. So yes. Just to be clear.
And somebody might be saying, why do you not extract all of the content? Well, guess what? Doing that, which requires a significant amount of resources, plus there is a significant amount of existing migration providers which are doing an awesome job, and the PnP is mainly there for configuration and template handling, not for competing against the content. But technically, you can absolutely provision multiple pages. So what we extract is just a welcome page. I could actually take this home page from here and just copy that either programmatically in the code, not like that, programmatically in the code, or just programmatically in my Visual Studio, and then I could easily update that to be home number 2, and that's it pretty much, and then I can modify what's the content inside of the page. So this way you would be able to have multiple pages in the template. Now, quickly, as you can see, we extract the sections, we extract columns, content, we have all of the data inside here. For example, where do we have that text which I was just looking into? This is the custom welcome page with complete section. Where is it?
The text is the content control.
There it is. There we go. So SIG demo live extraction. So there's the text which I added on the page, and now it's extracting. Now, this is how you. This is the easiest way to figure out what's the structure. Obviously, there is a schema. There is a documented way of doing this without extraction as well. Now, in my demo, we wanted to concentrate on, okay, how do I apply certain things with a SharePoint Framework solutions, SharePoint Framework configurations to these existing sites. So I have already prepared previously this template by partly extracting, partly manually modifying the XML, and we can analyze what's actually included in the template. So in this template, we will deploy a new field called a %. So this is the same % field with, if you have done SPFX extension tutorials, this is exactly the same what we're doing there, but using a different option or different ways of achieving this. But the key point noticed here is that I'm actually doing association to a client-side component ID. And immediately when I do this and apply this template, this will mean that the field customizer with that manifest ID is automatically associated to the % field, which means that as long as the field customizer has been deployed using the tenant deployed option, the field customizer is automatically available within the site, even though you don't explicitly install the solution to the site. Hopefully that did make sense. The same actually, so what I'm doing here, let's have a look on. So we're provisioning one field and adding that SPFX association to that field. Then we're provisioning an orders field list where we actually use that field. So that will mean that there's an existing then additional list available whenever we apply this template. We also apply client-side pages. So we apply a new home ASPX, and that's using the override true option, which will essentially override the native out-of-the-box welcome page. And in here, we also have, well, we have the newsreel web part, site activity web part. We have a custom text there, additional custom, that's the content for the custom text. We have a custom web part, which is essentially the same. This is actually referring to the control ID and the manifest ID of our to-do web part. And because, again, the to-do web part has been deployed using the tenant scope option, the only thing what we need to do is associate these IDs on the right location, and voila, those will start working within the site. And now I'll scroll down slightly. There's one more customization here, which is the application customizer. So this is for doing custom header and footer within a site whenever this has been applied, and it's using the custom action option, and it has the client-side component ID as well, and we're using the client-side component properties there as well. I can actually get rid of that one because we don't need that. So this one has to match with the manifest ID of the application customizer. Now, quickly explaining, and this might be super familiar for you, but as an example, if I take this application customizer, every single SharePoint framework component has a unique ID in the manifest, and that's essentially the ID where we're associating these things. And as long as this solution has been deployed to the app catalog, SharePoint will realize that, hey, okay, within this site, because the application customizer is existing with that ID, I'm going to render this JavaScript on the page. Bert, you were maybe potentially planning to jump in.
Oh, no, sorry.
Okay, you just unmuted yourself, so cool. Okay, let's have a look at me talking quite a lot. So let me actually do this in practice. So let's get rid of all of that. We want to apply the template, and let's go to our newly created site. We just created the new site, which was the test SIG 5. Not customized, and nothing has been installed. This is the existing site. There is an API to create modern groups. You can easily do that. That's not a problem. And after creating the modern group, it's just a matter of, or modern site, it's just a matter of applying a template. So out of the box site, let's go back into code. And again, we have this in the PowerShell format as well, starting from next week. I'm going to put a breakpoint in somewhere in here. Let's actually put a breakpoint over there, so we know when it actually starts processing. So what we do is that we load that template. Again, it's a template object. You could programmatically create the whole object and add additional objects and everything else and configurations to it. But the XML is pretty nice because you can serialize and save that for the future usage. And now we're applying the template and clicking F10. Flipping, it is actually showing our progress. So we do have here presentation of the steps. So fields, list instances running through. That shouldn't take too long because there's only one orders list getting created. And then client pages. Ooh. And client pages processed. And then it runs quickly custom actions and web settings, and we're all done. So now, if our magic is fully applied, we go to the site, we press, let me actually do this from a browser. There's our site.
I think you connected to the wrong site.
Did I? Yes, I probably did. Yeah. Yes, I did. I didn't update this that one. Okay, so let me do this. So this one is a leftover. No, that's the news. No, this is out of the box. Okay, thank you. Discard changes. Yes, let's get to the previous. There we go. I'm going to actually move back on my code. Let's update the URL. Yes, I did. It helps if you update the URL accordingly. Test SIG 5, pressing F5. There is the one breakpoint still waiting, but this doesn't take too long. There we go. Now we can see the console actually running. And 2 out of 5 list instances is Irvin, we need to do something for the list. No, never mind. There's so many things what the list instance object handler is checking and verifying when it's actually doing the delta handling and comparison and applying the settings if something has been modified. That's why it takes a while. If you don't have any list instance configurations in your template, you can absolutely skip that, either programmatically or just skipping that in a template. There we go. Going back on the site, there's the SIG for number 5. And yes, hopefully F5. Da-da-da-da-da-da. We have a custom welcome page with our custom web part, with our application customizer. Everything is up and running within a matter of seconds. We can see the new orders list in here. Orders list has been configured. We still have the same application customizer in every single page of the site. If we add a new item to the list, we should see also our field customizer getting activated on this list, as we can see that. So the percent is getting rendered using alternative UI. So let's do here item B and 90. You can easily see that the field customizer association is correctly done as well. So key point, what we're trying to here kind of explain, and I'm repeating this many times. As you can see, there is no solutions installed on the site. And I'm still able to push all of my customization to the site as long as those customization has been marked using the tenant scope deployment option. And this way, I also have only one location to maintain, one location to update all of my solution. If I would now go and update my solution and JavaScript implementation of my headers, I'll just go to the app catalog, I'll just upload a new version, voila, it will reflect all of the changes within all of the sites. And that's super cool. So all of the things, well, technically, super happy personally as well, because this proves that we are able to do full automation of the structures and welcome pages and custom web parts and extensions using the remote API story, the remote provisioning story, and you're able to start adapting the modern experiences in SharePoint Online. So if somebody is telling that, hey, I can't do automation of whatever in the modern experiences, we kind of obviously there are nuances here and there, but for many cases, I think we've proven in this call that it actually can be done. Any questions? Anything what you want to see on this one? I'm looking into this. There's an active discussion in iWindow. I didn't have a chance to really quickly have a look on things. Nothing too urgent, but clearly people are happy on that. It's kind of cool. It's still, even though the original implementation of the PnP remote provisioning engine with the extraction support was introduced 2.5 years ago, it's still kind of mind-blowing that we're able to do this. And now that we're able to do this in the modern sites as well, that's super cool. By Ignite, and pretty much, well, by Ignite or closer, within the closed timeframes, we're able to do this within the communication sites as well. So programmatically create the communication site and also extract or apply settings in the communication sites and making sure that all of these things and the customizations are available there.
Well, technically speaking, extraction and applying on communication sites already works. But
true. The only thing what is missing is
the creation part is missing.
Yes, exactly.
The page story for communication sites is kind of the same. There is certain specific page templates like the full width template, which has limitations, and they are applied in the engine, but overall it should simply work.
Yes.
Cool. Good question from Russell.
Yes, there's an awesome question from Russell, and probably. So I am personally responsible on this from a SharePoint engineering perspective. So if I put my engineering hat on, we are looking into absolutely having a support for installing specific add-ins or SharePoint framework solutions to a site level natively within a SharePoint. Now, if you want to automate that using for multiple sites, then we'll absolutely add that support in the PnP provisioning engine, or how would I put it? That's the wrong way of putting that. Whenever the native support for installing add-ins from App Catalog, add-ins and SharePoint Framework solution from App Catalog to any sites within your tenant is available, that support will be absolutely added in the PnP provisioning engine as well. That's the right way of putting that. So That's timing for that one. I can't give you an exact timing, but it's coming pretty soon, most likely not by Ignite. So we're looking into having that support relatively soon as well. But then whenever we have the native API support, then it takes a while to get it into PnP provisioning, and after that you can automate add-ins getting deployed as part of the provisioning template as well. And we do know that there is a massive demand for that. One thing maybe to mention on that one, we're looking into right now having that as a capability which supports adding an add-in from the app catalog. So still in the future, we cannot technically, there's multiple, that is a super challenging thing to do. In the future, we're not looking into having an API to install add-ins from the store to your individual sites in a site collection, because that has a licensing implication, and there's so many variables within the add-ins in the store, and that gets super complicated. Now, we will have a capability of installing add-ins and SharePoint frameworks from your application catalog to the site. So you're able to automate that as long as the add-in has been approved in app catalog. Good.
And we have automation to push an add-in to the app catalog as well.
Yes.
PnP.
Yes.
So there's an extension method where you can which uploads the SPPKG package to the app catalog, figures out where the app catalog lives, and then puts it in there. And so if the running code has the proper permissions, you can automate that step as well.
Yes, and then there's the second dimension, which is Yannick is mentioning that, which is the site collection scope app catalog, and that's something what we're working on as well. But I can't give you a timelines on when that will be available. And that really the main point of that one is that you're able to then provide SharePoint Framework solutions specifically available within one site collection, rather than giving them and forcing them to be available cross-tenant. So that's really the main purpose of that one. Good. Now, the second demo what I wanted to do today, and we can have a look on the questions which is coming in the Ion window, was around the policy settings of the sites. And I'm going to do a live demo on this one in our MSIT, but I need to do some small cleaning, so I'm not actually showing you anything which I shouldn't be showing. So. And then I'm going to show you how to actually configure that in practice. So I'm going to go to our native SharePoint in a second. I'm going to show you this in a second. There we go. Now you can't see anything which is super confidential. Now, this is from the Microsoft MSIT, and this is how we have configured the classification and how it works when it has been properly configured. And like mentioned, this is the second. Now we're moving away from SPFX. We're moving into the site classification demo. So I wanted to quickly walk that through as well. So when we're creating a site, let's call this test versa SIG 02. It doesn't really matter. That's available. Good. You can see that we have this how sensitive is your data option in MSIT. And this is something what everybody, a tenant administrator, or technically the Azure AD administrator, you need to have an Azure AD permissions. You can control which are the options which are visible in here. And you can also control where does this link actually move into. So in our case, it's pointing to AKMS usage guidelines, which is one of the internal URLs end to end. But it's just essentially MSIT has decided what are these settings. But you can do this within your tenants as well. And this is apparently we haven't documented this anywhere, or properly at least anywhere. So nobody seems to know that. So in my case, let's actually walk this through. I'm selecting MBI, which means minimal business impact data. And the site is getting created. And whenever the site is actually created in a few seconds, luckily it's nowadays a few seconds rather than 15 minutes like it was at some point. That was so painful. Almost like farm solution deployments on the local development boxes, and you recycle the application pools, and anyway, those were the days. So here's my site, and the site classification works in a way that I actually, since I selected the MBI, I do have the MBI available in here. So, and if I click that one, it actually pinpoints again on the same URL, which was the guidance URL when I actually created the site. So now we know that people are looking into how to make this happen. I'm serious. I had one internal account contacting me saying, yeah, they need to make this happen, and that has been the #1 reason why the customer has delayed on moving into the modern experiences, which is awkward because we have this capability already. So let's actually make that configuration to our test tenant in here, which currently does not have that configuration. So if I go to the SharePoint, if I go to the create site, you can see that in here we're in default settings. We do not see that selection of the classification available. So the question is, how do I enable the classification within this site collection? So let me stop that one. That's a different demo, and jump into a PowerShell in here. Now, these settings and configuration is actually documented. And let me show you the URL. I'm going to paste this URL into my window as well. It is actually documented in this Microsoft Azure document called Azure Active Directory Commandlets for Configuring Group Settings. It is not, however, super clear anywhere within our documentation that this is reflecting or is visible. These configurations are visible in the SharePoint Online UIs whenever you actually apply these settings. And that's probably the missing piece within our messaging. There's few things to notice in here. So for example, in the article, it's saying that you should be using Azure Active Directory PowerShell version 2, which is actually wrong. You should not use PowerShell version 2. You should use the preview version. So this is the general availability version, which has been linked, which is actually missing those PowerShell commandlets, which has to be used. So slightly awkward again, but if you go to the Azure AD preview in the PowerShell gallery, that's what you should be using to make all of these things happen. And I do apologize from behalf of Microsoft once again, our lame documentation on this. So let's do that. So I already installed Azure AD Preview on my machine. I'm going to connect to Azure AD, so I'm going to execute that one on my favorite PowerShell development machine or tool, which is Visual Studio Code. So let me actually close all of these so I can actually get that Azure AD PowerShell visible. So I'm going to actually sign in here. I think I'm in this tenant. The tenant what we wanted to use for demonstration, and let me actually get that tenant. Sorry, way too many process. Like I said, I'm not super well prepared for today's demo. So here we go. This is the right tenant. Good. So now I've signed in to my Azure AD. We can see that we're signed in using that account against that SP Plat on Microsoft.com tenant. So I'm going to slightly zoom this more so I can actually see what I'm doing. Now, in here, I can see the current configuration of my Azure Directory setting templates. So if I execute F8, I can see that right now within my tenant, in this particular tenant, or sorry, these are the templates which are available for the configuration. And we want to use the group unified template. So what we do is that we use Azure Active Directory template with that specific ID. So that's matching actually that ID in here. So I'm going to actually create a template. There we go. And I'm going to actually create that setting template for that. And then there are, actually I need to update that to be accurate. There we go. And then there are certain string configurations which I can configure. These configurations are actually documented. Let's see if I can find that in the document in here. So in here in the Azure AD documentation, you can see enable group creation, group by creation, allowed group ID, usage guidelines URL, classification descriptions, default classification, and so on. So you can actually see the individual settings. And we are right now configuring the usage guideline URL, classification list, so individual options for the classification list, and what is the default classification. So let's actually do that. So let's add those settings in our object. And then we actually add that as a new Azure Active Directory setting. So now I can quickly double check my configuration. So let's actually double check that I'm not checking the right one. There's my current Azure Directory settings, all of them. There's my group unified configuration. If I take that ID, super intuitive, by the way, if I take that ID and have a look on the settings on that one, we can actually see the current configuration of my Azure AD settings. So we can see that my usage guidelines URL is that one, my classification list is HPI, MPI, LPI, top secret, and the default value I think was top secret. So now I'll come back on the Russell's question in a second. So now if I go back on because we have already applied the setting, now if I go back on my site, that's a wrong browser. Which one was it? There it is. No. Yes, that session. So now if I go back on my session in my tenant, the Splat tenant, if I request this site and page, click Create Site, and click Team, and start writing here something, we don't see that. Awesome. Yeah.
There might be some caching ongoing.
Yeah,
I can imagine if we don't check Azure AD with each page load.
That is true. So there is some level of fake caching here. I've seen this today when I was actually configuring this, but basically those configurations will enable here and that selection. So just out of curiosity, because I was seeing this in my own tenant. This is my own E3 tenant, which I use for testing as well. Let's see, what are we actually seeing here? Yes, so here you can actually see the similar configuration. I have my sensitive data selection, and there's my HPI, MPI, LPI, and top secret. And there's my usage guidelines link. If I click that one, that actually goes to the PnP page. But as a summary, yes, live demos is so there is a delay and technically, to be fully transparent, I did saw the caching for some reason earlier today in my tenant as well. So there is a small delay. To be fair, this configuration, what you do in the PowerShell against your Azure AD, is almost like a one-time thing. You design your classification list. You design what is my options for classification and what is the default classification, and that's it. And now in my case, let's just double check this one. So I'm going to create a new test such a SIG 06. Let's create this one. Oh, the default value is HPI because it's selecting the HPI in the UI. So in my tenant case. And now if I select this one, it's going to create the site. It's going to show that label within the site whenever somebody is accessing the site. If you click the label, it will redirect you to the URL, which we also configured in here as a usage guideline URL.
Can I add something to that, Vesa?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So you saw the out-of-the-box native UI experience to create modern team sites.
Yes.
If you, however, have your own custom implementation, custom UI,
yes,
then there is an option. There's a REST call, MS Graph REST call. It does give you these options. You cannot use the REST call to configure things. So for configuration, you have to use PowerShell, but you can simply grab the options and the URL and then embed that somewhere in your user interface if you want to do something similar.
Yes. And now coming back sorry.
Yeah, so which is a good thing because then you can mix and match the potentially out-of-the-box UI with the custom UI if needed.
Yes, absolutely. Now coming back on the Russell's question, so now if I click the LPI in here, it's going to open again at the URL, whatever it was defined. Coming back on Russell's question around, hey, does the classification change any behavior on the site? Not at least for time being. So this is mainly right now for just driving a classification across the site. So it is a classic requirement for the customers, at least in Europe, to have these kind of settings to legal restriction, legal guidance as well. And then the classification drives, for example, custom solution governance checking. If it's a HBI, for example, you're not in that site will disable programmatically, for example, sharing. So all of that is not natively, at least yet, within a SharePoint Online. We're looking into extending, let's say, rules and guidelines and all of that behind of these things in the future. Is the selected classification available in our code running on the site? Yes. So if you do site.classification, that actually has the value. So for this particular site collection, so if I do SharePoint site, SharePoint client site, I'm looking into the object. So there's my site class, for example, in the CSAM. The site class in the CSAM has a property called classification, and that's where the information is stored. So there's the classification property. But this is essentially just a string property for time being, which is essentially storing then the value HBI, MBI, and then it is being presented on the UI or the header section, and the link of that one will point anyway to the one centralized location.
But you can change the classification using code, just as
Yes.
you can do using the UI as well. So there's a
Yes.
UI option to change the classification.
Yes, absolutely. So you can, now that this one has been created, it's an LBI. If I go to site settings, site information, I can flip the site classification from here as well. So these things, these UIs are automatically there as long as you have the Azure AD based configuration available. And let's go back on the slides just to summarize things because we're running again out of time. But we will share this script within the modern customization story relatively soon. And I will, well, super soon. And we'll do a quick video, quick intros on all of this and documentation on this quite soon. Good. Moving back on slides, just double checking and summary and closing up for today. If there's any specific questions or comments. Any word on making extension available on classic sites? Right now, we're not looking that to actually happen. So the thinking behind of that is a great question from Russell around the extensions availability on the classic versus modern. Let's actually get to this one and talk about that one slightly. So the thinking is made on rather in the way that, hey, if you are using a classic experience, then you can use the classic user custom action and JS link and all of those capabilities. We're not looking into having extensions supported in the classic pages. The web parts are supported, client-side web parts are supported in the classic pages as well, but that's kind of an exception. The reason for not supporting extensions in a classic experience is mainly because the amount of work that would require, it would actually require us to do a massive rewrite of the whole classic experience.
Well, but he talks about classic, Russell talks about classic sites, but in the classic site you can have client-side pages.
Yeah, so, and yes, so let's be super clear on this one. The different data is not on the site type. So you can absolutely have a classic theme site with the modern experiences. So, and within the modern experiences, these extensions will work. Right. So the different data is not on the site type. It's not like if you select the modern theme site, you will have to use SPFX, or because in the modern theme sites, you can actually fall back on the classic experience as well. So it is really around what experience the end user is using, the modern or the classic. As long as there's a switch to classic experience link views, this is an issue. Yeah, we do understand that, and there should be an option to disable that link not to be visible. I'm not sure if that's already there. It should be there. Maybe I'll ping link. Lincoln. Yeah, maybe I'll ping Lincoln on that one because that's a good point. Good. That's actually an awesome point from Chris. Good. Lincoln owns that capability in our PM team. Just double checking quickly the slides. Yeah, the site classification things mentioned in here. That was the demo, and there's the resources for those. We'll get this one mentioned in the video recording notes, so you can easily find them from there as well. But I think that's pretty much it for this one. Just quickly looking into the questions. If there's a link in the classic, if there's a link to the classic was the target, yeah, yes. Good comment from Paul. Russell, so what's next for in SPFX after extensions? We'll see. I think it's the time to get things more polished and more mature and more reliable and more faster and everything else. Yes. So I think the number one thing what we want to do. So considering where we have been for past, let's say, 1.5 years with SharePoint, is this kind of a weird middle section. Some of the things are modern, some of the things are classic, and then the end users are super confused on when they land into the modern or when they land into the classic. Now, with extensions, with Ignite announcements, everything else, we're finally getting to the status where finally the modern experience is, I would say, fulfilling enough. It's consistent. You are able to do that in a consistent way. And that means then that what we want to do next is more and more invest on polishing that, making that more controllable, making that more mature. Obviously, there will be more capabilities in the future as well, more options in the future as well for development perspective, and more capabilities. And from a SharePoint capability perspective, we are obviously looking into modernizing more and more and more, let's say, classic SharePoint goodies as well. Good. Can sites be classified if they are created from a SPO admin center? I don't think so. There's no UI for that for now. You can absolutely then execute a PowerShell to classify them afterwards by using the site.classification property. And there will be announcements around the well, let's wait for Ignite. So Ignite will bring a lot of things, new stuff on the table. So on a lot of the things which we should have already moved on, but Ignite is coming pretty soon. Good. I think that's it for this one. So hopefully the demos were useful. Hopefully we were able to kind of convince you guys also, or demonstrate that you are able to use already and push out your customizations on the modern experiences. Extensions will go GA relatively soon, like mentioned quite a few times. We want to help you on the journey of moving into the modern experiences as well, because we absolutely believe that's the right way to do and right way of doing customizations and the right UIs in the future for SharePoint. Now, if you disagree on that statement and if something is missing, please do let us know, because that input and your input is super valuable for us for addressing these gaps. So please do share. Don't be quiet. And if you are in Ignite, please drop by and let's have a chat in the PnP booth or within our sessions and so on.